We've had a lot of requests for this, and that's a full winterization video. And how I do winterizations for my customers, I use an air compressor to blow out the lines, and then follow it up with antifreeze. Now I know most people watching this do not have an air compressor. If you don't, that's okay. You can skip that step and just use the antifreeze. The reason I use an air compressor and antifreeze is I can push all the water out. Then when antifreeze goes in the lines, it's nice and pure. It's not mixing antifreeze and water. And you use a lot less antifreeze, and I feel it does a better job. Now I know there's people out there, they're going to say that I've only used air, blowing out the lines, been doing it for 20 years, never had a problem. Well, it could be where they're at, maybe they're a little further south, don't get the hard freezes like we do up here in Michigan, or they have a certain RV that it works that way. But the reason I won't do just blowing air through the lines is you don't get all of the water droplets out of things like toilet valves and faucets, or especially tankless water heaters. And if I do a job like that, something fails, I have to replace it. So we do a job correctly with antifreeze followed up after the blowing the air out of the lines. So we're going to start out by draining all the tanks, and I'll walk you through the process step by step. Erica's behind the camera. She'll be asking questions and make sure I don't forget something for you. So let's get started. We'll drain out the gray and black tanks along with the freshwater tank. We are hooked up to the full hookups here. Fresh tank drain is going to be underneath in the back somewhere. Okay. Usually they're in the back or sometimes by the axles, and this one's right here behind the left rear tire. That'll drain out the freshwater tank. While the tanks are draining, we'll drain the water heater. This is a Suburban water heater. So these are steel tank water heaters. They have an anode rod in it. So make sure you have the water heater switch off on the outside. If you don't have a switch on the outside, go inside your breaker panel and find a water heater circuit breaker and turn that one off. Because you don't want your water heater and electric running when there's no water in it because you burn out the elements.
What about hot water so they don't burn themselves? What do they got to do for that?
If your water heater was on previously, turn it off, and you can wait a couple hours for it to cool, or you can just turn your faucet on, put it on hot, and it'll run out that hot water, and then it'll put cold water into your water heater and cool it off that way. This one's been off for a few weeks. Everything is safe. First off, we'll open the valve up top, relieve any pressure. Okay, pressure is out. So the Suburban anode rod, this is an 1 1/16 socket. If you have a Dometic, which is a plastic plug, you're either 7/8 or 15/16. Now when I pull out the anode rods, I'll inspect them. This should be one solid rod all the way through. This is about 30 to 40% left on this anode rod, so we'll change this out in the springtime for sure.
Then this has to completely drain?
Yep, it has to completely drain. We can open this valve up top and let it drain faster. Okay. Water heater is drained, and before we blow air through it or put antifreeze, you definitely want to take the water filter out. There's no filter in this. This is full of water. So we need to empty this out completely.
So have you flipped any levers or valves in here yet or anything?
Nothing yet. I'll show you which ones I flip for this RV and tell you why I'm flipping them.
I got to ask the questions that the people want to know.
That's right.
Because I'm the one who needs the step-by-step.
Okay, everything now has been drained. And this particular RV, they have a hose hooked up here for a black water flush. So we can get these out of the way.
So we just took it off. What is that, the spray hose?
This was the city water inlet connection. We're just removing all these extra things, that way I can show you when I'm blowing out, because these have to be removed before I blow it out anyway. I'm going to get the compressor and hook it up. This is the Viair 450P. You can either use a 400 or 450 because they have a pressure switch inside. They won't keep running. They'll shut off 150 pounds on the air compressor. But you do have to use a regulator, which is set at 30 psi before you hook it up to the RV. Otherwise, too high a pressure, you can blow out things inside the RV. And remember, if you don't have an air compressor, you can skip this step. If you are interested in this air compressor type, this one is hooked up to a battery. I put it onto the truck because it's easier than finding one on the RV mostly. And so the short guy here has an on-off switch here, and it has two hoses on it. One hose is extension, the other one is just a regular hose. You can use extension if you want to, but with both hooked up, I have 60 feet of hose to use. And this is the regulator. It comes with 3 different pieces. You have to connect one side and the other. Basically, this screws onto the RV or a hose. You hook the regulator up to it, and then you hook up your air hose, and it blows air through it. All right. To start off with, I always blow out the black tank flush line. So that's going to be the one labeled black tank flush. Sometimes there's 2. Usually there's 1 in an RV. So you're going to see 0 PSI on the gauge because it's no restriction on this line. It's blowing all that air out right to the black tank. It only takes a couple seconds. I let it go 5 to 10. That way I know all of the water is pushed out of that. If possible, when we get to antifreeze, we'll put some of that through this as well.
So where is that water going to right now?
That is going out the black tank, out the sewer, because the valve is still open for the black tank. I'm going to move this over to the city water connection. So right now the water heater is not bypassed yet. I'm going to blow some air through this. It'll push some water out of the water heater because the bypass valves are right here, which is a couple feet of line from the water heater to the valves. So in this situation, I'm going to blow air through it, which will push cold water through the water heater. And then I will put the anode rod back in and blow some more air through it so it'll push water from the hot side out of the water heater. Because otherwise, this little section of line from here to the water heater will still have water in it, and you possibly could break the water heater. Now I'm putting the anode rod back in so we can blow out the hot line that goes from the water heater back to the main system.
And that's still the city water connection?
Still the city water connection. I'll use their outdoor shower because right here. Open up the hot faucet. There it goes. So this is water coming from the hot line and water that's going from the water heater back to the main system. That's the water I'm pushing out now, along with some of the water in this hose. So in a couple seconds, it'll blow out some air. Now after we got the hot line from the water heater to the main system blowing out, I'll put the water heater in bypass mode, and then we'll finish blowing out the rest of the lines.
So this is bypass mode right now?
This is bypass mode now.
For this RV?
For this RV. These are usually behind the water heater. Before we finish up in this section, we'll take the anode rod out of the water heater so we're done with that part.
And someone asked on one of our reels why you leave it out for the winter.
Well, the reason I leave it out for the winter is that way any water droplets that are inside there has somewhere to escape to. And always a little bit of water stays on the bottom of the water heater. And before I pull that out and open this top valve, we're leaving the air pressure in there.
So we're completely done in this section?
Water heater is 100% done. Now I come inside, I clear all the sinks out. Usually people are storing things in there like soaps or extra things. I take all the drains out. That way when I put antifreeze inside there, things aren't getting messy. I always wipe up and I'm done. And there's less things for me to clean up. So the air compressor is still hooked up right now.
Right now you're just blowing air through the line still?
Yes. So this is the kitchen area, which is furthest away from the air compressor. So it'll take the longest for the air to come through here.
Look at this nice stuff right here.
Once I do hot or cold, I'll turn the valve off. I'll go to the other side. So now I'm going to do hot, this should be. And I'll turn the valve open again. A little bit of air will come out because it's in the first part of the faucet, and then the water will come out before air comes out again.
Okay, so explain that more. So every RV has, you got to do hot and cold like that?
And I do hot and cold separately. That way I know hot is done and then cold is done, or vice versa. Also, as you see, as I was blowing water out of the lines, that air come out, and then some water, then some air, then some water. What's happening for that is air is pushing behind the water, and once the majority of the water is out, some of that water falls back down, and then the air tries to catch it when it gets into like a group, more or less, and blocks the line again, so air pushes it. That's why blowing air through your lines only can have some issues, because that water always settles down. Unless you have a lot of pressure or a perfect scenario, it's hard to get all of the water out by just air. Now we're in the bathroom area, so we're going to do the hot line first.
And this goes quicker because we're closer?
Because we're closer, and we already have blown up the majority of the line. And when the shower, I'll get the faucet close to the drain, that way we don't make a mess all over the shower. And the toilet. And also, this RV has a washer-dryer connection, which is up in the wardrobe in the bedroom. I don't blow air through those because it's hard and messy to go get a hose hooked up to that. I'll do that when I do antifreeze only, but there's only a short section of hose left to do that one. The same with low point drains. Those are in that same area. I'll do those on antifreeze only. Now, if you have an ice maker or a dishwasher or an appliance that has water in it, you have to look up on the manufacturer of how you winterize those properly. Sometimes you can blow just air through them, or sometimes you have to let them run a couple cycles through, like a washing machine or dishwasher. Ice makers can vary. Sometimes you can put air through them. Sometimes you can just unhook the line behind it and it's good. Or sometimes you got to run antifreeze through it, which can take 24 hours for it to fully cycle through and make some slushy ice cubes, and you know antifreeze is into the system. And with the filter still inside of the refrigerator, the ice will not be pink because the filter filters out the pink color, but the antifreeze keeps going through it. So make sure you get all of the water points in your RV. If you have an outdoor kitchen, outdoor showers, anything, just walk around, make sure if water comes out of it, that can freeze, make sure it's properly winterized. Especially in the wet bay, some RVs have a power tank fill or valves, so we'll just take this lever and it'll flip back and forth. Now air is blowing into this, which is blowing some air back to the freshwater tank where you can fill it up from. Or if you put a valve at a 45-degree angle, it will also make sure the water is out of it. If you have a system with a whole bunch of valves, that's a proper way to do those. Now, if you're doing antifreeze only, this is where you'll start your process. On this RV, all of my connections are on the outside for it. Similar to the bypass valves, it has two valves here for winterizing. So this is going to have a little hose that'll go inside the antifreeze jug. And we got to shut this hose off. If it was already on, it was already off before we got here. But we shut that off, which is a line coming from the freshwater tank. This one is a factory setup. This is a Cedar Creek model. Some RVs have panels and things labeled. This one doesn't have many labels. I had a sticker that's down here that tells you the direction of everything. And you always have to keep in mind, they use generic stickers in RVs. Not everything is the same for how they're built. So you have to use a little bit of follow the flow of where the valves are, because it might not match the sticker exactly. If you don't have a setup out here, you have to find a water pump, and you might have to put a pump winterization kit in there. And you can get a Camco one. I'll put a link down in the description of the video of the ones that I use. They're pretty simple to use. It goes before the pump, and you can flip a valve on it. That way you put the hose into an antifreeze jug, it sucks that through the pump, and when you're done using the antifreeze, you put the valve back to straight, and it's ready to use a fresh tank next summer. Okay, let me get the air compressor out of the way. So this is a larger fifth wheel with a washer-dryer connection and a water filter. So most likely, we're going to use 4 gallons of antifreeze total for this RV between what gets sucked into the lines and what we dump down the drains inside.
Now, you said that you blow air through here, so you use less antifreeze. So how much antifreeze might someone use if they didn't use air?
I'd probably figure 2 more gallons. And then we have to flip this valve on. So on valves of RVs, or in general, if it's straight with the hose, means it's on. If it's crossways from the hose like this one, it means it's off. So this hose is a little bit stiff. Here's a little trick for you. If you have an outdoor shower hose like this, I will kind of set it on top for some weight so the hose stays in the jug. Now we have to go inside and turn the pump on. That'll start sucking the antifreeze through this. So we can hear the pump going. A lot of times we have to bleed air out of the system so the pump will start priming and suck antifreeze out of the jugs. So I'm going to open up any faucet. There we go. So now the jug into the system, filling up the filter, then it'll fill the lines. It'll take about a gallon of antifreeze to prime the system, and you'll see it'll be pretty close to a full gallon. Then the pump should shut off at full pressure.
So what did you just do there? Turn the valve off?
I turned the valve off because this little outdoor shower is stuck open. There we go. The pump just shut off, and we're at just about a full gallon. The pump shuts off and it gets to pressure, which a standard pump is 55 pounds of pressure, which is city water pressure. And when it sucks in the antifreeze and it fills all the lines and the pump shuts off, that means it has pressurized the system.
And are you holding your finger over that so it doesn't suck air in? Or
Sometimes it makes a little mess, just a habit of mine to hold my finger over it.
See, I got to ask the questions. Those are the things everyone's going to comment about.
Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
And I don't think about those things because it's natural with me.
That's why I'm here to do the questions for our long walkthrough.
Okay. Now I switched out the jug. I had the hot valve open before this. I'm going to open the cold one, and I have to shut it off by there. So I got to use a couple hands. I'm going to hold the hose into here because I have to use this right now. And then I'm going to turn the cold open. So I'll blow some air, antifreeze again. Now we know this section is done. I'm going to go inside to the faucets.
Just for the pressure again? To
Yes.
keep the hose in because it's tight or stiff?
Yes.
Okay. But that's not normally something you always have to do.
Not normally, just a quick trick for you. Just like putting air in a system, I'll start at the faucet that's furthest away from the pump. That way you get the majority of the lines of antifreeze into it, and it makes the other ones much quicker. So one side at a time, cold or hot, doesn't matter. Nice and pink. Turn it off. Go to the other, cold or hot, whichever one you didn't do the last time.
Can we just run it till it turns pure pink?
Till it turns pure pink. Okay, done in the kitchen. Let's go to the bathroom. I'm going to switch out the antifreeze jug with a spray out. This is where if you had two people, one can be outside watching a jug and switch it out while the other person is inside doing the faucets.
That's what we normally do, but I'm filming for you guys. And it just automatically starts sucking?
I turned the pump off in that
when we
process.
walked in here.
When I walked in. So when I go back inside, turn the pump back on. It really wouldn't hurt anything for just a minute, but I don't want to risk it and burn the pump up for any reason.
Is the pump only working when you open these valves? It's not constantly doing it?
Correct, because the pump will shut off and it gets up to pressure. And I hit the toilet a couple times. That way all the antifreeze goes through the whole valving system. Now for the washer dryer connections, I have a little short piece of hose I can screw onto the valves. And this is a regular hose. It has little knobs on the outside of it. Sometimes that gets stuck trying to turn it. So I have this little adapter that goes from a female to female, the male to male. Just something I picked up to make the job easier in there. Or if you have a hose with smaller knobs on it, helps as well.
Now, they don't have a washer and dryer in here, correct?
There's no washer dryer, but there is still the connections. And water's in those connections, so we have to put antifreeze in those lines, and dump antifreeze into the drain inside here. Okay, so I'm on the cold side first. Put it into the jug. Open up the valve.
So right now you're getting water out or putting antifreeze in?
Some water's coming out and the antifreeze will come out right behind it. So this RV already has these valves unhooked because nothing come out of them when we open them up. So what you would do is put your hose onto one of your spigots, open the valve, and you'll see some clear come out and then pink. Shut the valve off, unhook your hose, go to the next one. Now inside of your jug's gonna be a mix of water and antifreeze, so don't use that to winterize. You have to dump that down a drain somewhere. Then we'll take some good antifreeze and put it into the drain for the washer connection here. Then this section is done. Now since there's not an ice maker to put into this video, when I come across one of those in the future, I'll do a short little video on winterizing that, and I'll put that in the description of this YouTube video. And outside, you need to find your low point drains. There's some more underneath the RV, some more low, of course. And there might be a valve, there might be a cap. These ones, they're right down here. So we have water pressure in there now. I'm gonna open this up. Oh, I need a pair of pliers for this one. Okay, so there's gonna be some pressure behind here. So all we need to do is crack it open enough.
What does this do?
This is another water line connection, so we're getting antifreeze into this line.
And how do you do that? By just opening it up? Or?
Opening it up.
Oh, and when you
now
open
some
it
water
up,
comes out. And you keep watching here, it'll turn pink.
and you can hear the pump cycling on and off right now.
Yep. Now we're pink, so we can close it. You could turn your pump off, depressurize the system, take your plug out, turn the pump on for a second and do that. But that's why I wear gloves for this, so just get less messy on my hands, and I do it at the connections.
So you're doing a second one right there?
Yeah, there was a hot one and then a cold one. There always be two together. And finger tight is normal because there's a rubber gasket inside those and it doesn't take a lot to seal those off. Okay, two last things I'll do outside if possible. And we have an outdoor shower like this. There's a hose connection on this. I'll hook this up to the black tank flush line so we can put some antifreeze into that.
Ooh, look at you.
Gives an extra sense of security and all of that. Even though we did blow it out and it should be good, if we can, we will. Hooked up there, open up the faucet. Oh, this one won't work between these threads and those threads. They don't want to go together, so I can't do it. I'm not worried about it in the situation, but if it's simple to do, we always do it for the customer. Now we have antifreeze into all of the lines, so we're going to take this jug out of there, flip this valve back over here, turn off that area.
So that would be...
The hose going to the jug. We'll turn this one back on. That way when they open the RV up again, if they want to put water in the fresh tank, they have the ability to, because this goes from the fresh tank to the pump. Okay, once we're done putting antifreeze through all the lines, during that process, we just push some water through all the traps and drains. I leave the tanks open during that process. Now before we go to put antifreeze into the traps themselves, I'll close all the tank valves. That way, when the antifreeze goes down the drains, some of that goes into the tank valves, and there'll be some antifreeze right at the valve versus the water being there. And if that was to freeze, that'd be a bad thing. Before I'm done in this section, I'll clean up whatever antifreeze dripped down from the process. To keep the mice out, I'll put the plug back in the bottom as well. Now we'll go inside and put this down the drains. Now we dump antifreeze down all of the drains. There's a P-trap in there which holds water. So we put antifreeze into that, we'll push out some of that water and have some antifreeze into it because you don't want it to freeze.
How much do you put in?
About that much. So this would do basically one sink.
Why'd you do that?
I put some in the toilet and flush it so it goes into the black tank, so we have some antifreeze mixed with any possible water that's still left in the tank. Then put a little bit of antifreeze back on top. That way the seal stays wet, because a dry seal can break down and start to leak or not work properly over time. So you always want some water or antifreeze on top of your seal. Now we're at the drain for the washing machine connection. We'll dump antifreeze down that just like we did any of the sinks. Make sure you finish up with all of your antifreeze lines. You turn the pump off.
What about the water heater? Do you got to do something with that? What's the thing that people always mess up on the water heater?
We talked about this earlier a little bit. We took the anode right out of the water heater. On this one, there's an on-off switch outside. If you don't have an on-off switch outside, I always find the breaker panel box inside. Turn off the circuit breaker, which would be this guy right here. Find one labeled the water heater and flip that off. Now everything is wrapped up except for covering up the water heater and closing doors and locking things up. And if you're wondering of what all the steps I did or afraid you might miss something doing winterization, I feel you there. I go through a checklist when I'm doing things because I go through a lot of RVs. Each one is different. The checklist covers all the options I can run across for RVs. I'll put a link to a sample report I do in the description down below. For each customer I do a job for, I do a job report. And the checklist for winterization is a job report I send to the customer. It gives good pictures, things that I did throughout the job site, where I left keys, what things I did. I also have a spot at the bottom for things needed done for spring repairs. That way, and I put them on a list now, I look that report up in the springtime, the customer gets all their things taken care of. And also, the customer gets to see all the things I've done on the job, and no one's left in the dark. So you're watching this video, winterizing. I'm sure you're ready for the cold, so have a good winter, and I'll see you next spring.